The human brain is the most exquisite, complex thing we know of. A few pounds of electrochemical device that somehow powers me, my thoughts, my hopes, my aspirations. When I think of what that represents, that it looks out on a world, on a universe it's trying to understand, that just still sets the hairs on the back of my neck on end.
Millions of years of evolution have had its impact to make a structure that's truly amazing, that endows us with the capacity to engage in art and learning and communication and language, the most amazing abilities.
The human brain is the source of cognition, thought, feeling, emotion, planning. It's perhaps the most complicated object in the universe, and we don't really understand, and we don't really have good theories for how it does what it does. That's what makes it such a wonderful object to study.
World-leading scientists are on the brink of being able to cure disease, harness the power of artificial intelligence, and augment the brain to help create a better world. This film explores what we need to do to get there.
Right now, we don't know enough about the fundamentals of how the brain works. This would be like trying to find a cure for bubonic plague in 15th century Europe without knowing about the existence of microbes. How can you even begin to approach this if you don't know that there's such a thing as viruses and bacteria? We have to open up that bottleneck and make the fundamental discoveries, things that are there in the brain but simply haven't been uncovered yet. My primary interest is in the mechanisms that control the development of the brain, from the earliest point in life at birth and then through adolescence. I've developed a particular passion for understanding this one disorder, Rett syndrome, where there's a point mutation in one gene that leads to a devastating brain disorder. It affects about 1 in 10,000 girls. It's my conviction that if we can understand how a single gene, when mutated, gives rise to aberrant brain development, that it might have an impact on our ability to understand more complex neurological disorders in general.
My daughter now at 21 is in a wheelchair. She's unable to speak. She has seizures. She's fed through a feeding tube. She has anxiety problems, muscular skeletal problems. She's very tight. I mean, the list goes on and on. She handles it with such grace and patience, and she has a sense of humor. She gives us so much affection, and she's amazing, and she's the soul of our family.
Our research has unfolded essentially over a 30-year period. And now with new technologies, for example, a method called single-cell sequencing, we're able to look at the individual cells to get really crystal clear answers that we've been seeking for a long time. We take some blood and put it into a dish and then convert those blood cells into human neurons that can be studied, and we can study differences in neuronal connectivity in terms of the wiring of the brain that underlie mental disorders. So we're very close to being able to pinpoint in the genome what's responsible, and that's the first step towards developing a therapeutic.
Could we get her walking? Could we have some hand use? Could she learn to speak again? I think those things are possible, potentially. We won't know until we try. But I think, we're at the point now where we're going to have an opportunity to try, and that's really exciting.
There are so many people affected by mental disorders in this world. About 1 in 4 people live with mental disorders. That means that every person, every family, every community is touched by the hardships of mental disorders.
It's been over 40 years that I've suffered with depression. On the scale of severity, my depression is totally debilitating. It's the physical pain, the mental pain, and the anguish are just maddening.
Depression is the #1 most disabling condition in the world, per the World Health Organization. It's surpassed cancer and heart disease in the last year. About 2/3 of patients tend to respond to traditional antidepressants. About 1/3 are what we call treatment resistant.
I've probably taken 20 to 30 different types of medications, all to no effect. Either the medication didn't work at all, or the side effects were so onerous that you felt like you were dying.
We have, for the last 2 years, been working on developing a brand new way of doing transcranial magnetic stimulation. So what that is that's a electromagnet that is about the same magnetic field strength as an MRI scanner, but focused on a brain region. And so we developed a very powerful form of TMS derived directly from the same signal the brain uses itself. We can complete 7 months worth of TMS over 5 days.
My depression, for the first time, basically in 40 years, went away, and it was like heaven. It was like nirvana. It was like being reborn. My senses were all amped up. It was just, the whole world was anew to me. I have had a second week of treatment, and the benefits then lasted up to about 2 weeks, and I'm now looking forward to getting additional treatments.
It's quite difficult for young investigators starting up their careers to get enough resources to really do the riskier things. If we can support that type of research fairly early in somebody's career, you then create a much bigger impact in the long run.
I was not the typical scientist. I didn't know anybody who was a scientist. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I always liked science, but I never thought about it as a career until I started working in the lab.
When I first met her, you could just see there was a spark, and there's just amazing creativity. She epitomizes what I feel is sort of the next wave of scientists, because she's smack in the middle of one of the most interesting fields of neurobiology.
My lab studies the molecular mechanisms underlying itch, touch, and pain. Millions of people worldwide suffer from disorders that affect our sense of touch, and that includes chronic pain and chronic itch. And one of the most common causes of chronic itch is eczema, which is often called the itch that rashes.
I was diagnosed with eczema when I was probably around 7 or 8 years old. When I was in my 20s, I just had full-blown eczema head to toe. Skin is the largest organ of your body. So if your entire skin is covered in a rash, it's hard to get comfortable. My skin's tingling the whole time.
In my lab, we record neuronal activity. So we use electrical recordings of neurons because electricity is the currency of the nervous system. And we also do imaging to look at structural regions of the brain, how disease changes the circuits, as well as induces changes at the molecular and cellular level. And we're just starting to take that information and build tools to start to decipher how higher level processing goes. We're going to really see exponential discovery in the next 10 years.
It would be amazing if Diana's research came to fruition and she got enough funding, she learned everything she could, because I think there would be overjoyed eczema patients everywhere.
If we don't have a pipeline of really talented, smart, ambitious people like Diana that want to come into the field, well then, we're not going to get there.
Sergio Pasca is one of our amazing young breakthrough scientists. One aspect of Sergio's work that I think is so phenomenal is that he's so focused on discovering the causes of autism, which is a worldwide problem, increasing in prevalence, increasing in detection, but in absolute numbers, the number of children with autism is just grown so much. And Sergio's work is really beginning to get at the basis of autism in a way that we've never been able to understand before.
I actually did not start by being fascinated by neuroscience or by brain sciences. My encounter during medical school with one of my first patients with autism is really what made a difference. You know, seeing the struggles of the parents on one side and just seeing how complex and, you know, puzzling this disorder really was is what sort of like what drew me towards the brain first, and then brain disorders sort of like broadly. One limitation to approaching the human brain and really understanding how it develops has to do with our lack of direct access to functional human brain tissue from patients. In studying cancer, you just essentially go and take a piece of tissue. You bring it into the lab, you put it in a dish, and you try to see what goes wrong and try to find ways of stopping that growth. We can't just do that for studying human brain disorders. We can actually harvest skin cells and take those skin cells into the lab and turn them into stem cells. And stem cells have this amazing ability to turn into any other cell type. So of course we guide them to become brain cells. And we've been developing technology in the last few years to really take those stem cells and develop a three-dimensional living brain tissue from patients in a dish. You can actually see them by eye. They grow up to 4 or 5 millimeters in size. Essentially, they're like three-dimensional structures resembling the human brain that are derived non-invasively from a specific patient. This is a tool that the scientific community can really use to derive human brain tissue from patients and ask questions about how the brain assembles itself and how then different brain regions talk to each other in a non-invasive way.
今年又是我们医学科学的发展主力军，所以说他们的提高可以对神经科学起很大作用，啊，所以这里我们科室就是7年医生应该占我们的70%、80%。那么这样子就是通过脑科学、神经科学研究，既解决了我们临床问题，又解决了我们经济发展问题。脑科学应该是我们人类未来发展方向。
It's going to take so many different disciplines and people to really push the boundaries. And the fact that the technology is ripe for that.
All the great breakthroughs really are because you take a wonderful idea from one field and you bring it over to another field, and it just breaks it wide open.
All of human advance has really been based on our ability to create new tools. We evolved, our brains were shaped by millions of years of us learning to fashion stone tools. In fact, there's a view that those stone tools literally shaped our cortex. And this interplay between our technology and our neurology has always been there in our history and will be as we go forward. Artificial intelligence is another technology. It's going to be a set of tools that will change and extend us. The synergy between neuroscience and AI is a very deep one. So as we start to be inspired by actual neurons and build programs and computer programs that emulate that, as we do that, we start to be able to literally simulate aspects of human nervous processing. So the real question is, as we really deepen the application of principles from neuroscience to think about how we can use those insights to power our programs, what might that look like?
My connection with brain-machine interfaces began, I'd say, about 20 years ago. So I've been studying the posterior parietal cortex, the place where intent and the awareness of intent are first formed. Based on this research, we began to think that we could analyze people's intentions, tap into the commands that will go out to the body to form actions. A brain-machine interface is a machine that's connected directly to the brain to receive signals. Then it usually also has a component that decodes or makes sense of those signals. When you go to reach for a glass of water, you don't think how your fingers are configured and how much force you have to apply. You just have the intent to reach for the glass. And so we thought we'd tap into those high-level signals to help patients who are paralyzed. Eric Sorto had a gunshot wound to his neck, and as a result, he can't move any of his limbs, his legs or his arms. The basic aim of the work is for him to be able to control his environment just with his thoughts.
The first time I made the robotic arm work, it was an out-of-body experience. I was so excited. I wish I could jump out of my wheelchair and high-five everybody because it was just so amazing and so easy.
We've been able to distinguish and decode some things that are preconscious. And so we can actually design decoders that can decode activity before you're aware of it. We can input signals by stimulation of the brain. So you can imagine getting your email or looking something up on Google just by thinking about it. So in a sense, having a cell phone in the brain.
I never dreamed that anything of this was possible, but after seeing the results, I could see how the sky's the limit with the project because it's so successful and we do accomplish pretty much magic here.
Right now is not only the most exciting time in neuroscience, it's the most exciting time in science, period, that I've lived through in my 40 years of doing science.
Neuroscience is truly at an inflection point, and I think that because of all the advances that we've made in so many different fields that are going to converge, it'll be a limitless frontier.
The benefits for everyone are just enormous. The possibilities of understanding and curing disorders, treating psychiatric illness, and then to understand basic science, I think we're at the tipping point now.
We're aspiring for everyone to have a good life, for people with severe illnesses to live full lives, lives rich with recovery and joy and contribution.
In neuroscience, now is always a good time. The continuing present we're in it calls for work, it calls for action. And with the right support, you will really catalyze those fields to produce more than the sum of their parts.
We have an opportunity now, like we've had few times before, to move forward at a rapid pace with the appropriate resources. We also have the opportunity to take full advantage of the skills of more and more young people across the world, and to be able to excite them about contributing to the betterment of the human condition.
We are closer than ever to unlocking the potential of the human brain. But to push through the last remaining barriers, we need more fundamental research and more young scientists to conduct it, with support not just from governments and private funding, but every member of society. When our minds are wide open, the possibilities are truly limitless.